Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, as France enshrined abortion access in its constitution, England and Wales are facing a sharp rise in abortion prosecutions. We'll be talking shortly to Mara Clarke, a pro-choice activist based in London, as to why this is happening. And here in France, a boom in self-defense courses for women, while they also learn how to avoid legal ramifications. Plus, anger over the decision to withdraw Ivory Coast women's football team from the competition at the Paris Olympics this July. But first, and with France having enshrined abortion access in its constitution last month, across the Channel it's a totally different story. Recently, both England and Wales have been facing a sharp rise in abortion prosecutions. A law dating from the 19th century is being used to prosecute women with at least one case leading to incarceration. In the last 18 months alone, 6 women have been prosecuted over suspected abortion offences. Joining me now from London is Mara Clarke, the co-founder of Supporting Abortions for Everyone. Mara, thank you so much for your time. The world, of course, is very much focused on the US these days and the battle for abortion rights, but it's not just America as we see here. So how is it that with the UK having passed a law allowing access to abortion in 1967, that there's been an uptick in prosecutions?
It is pretty mind-boggling, isn't it? So the 1967 Abortion Act did make allowances for abortion under certain circumstances, but actually somebody who wants an abortion has to get permission from 2 doctors to have that abortion, and both doctors need to agree that the abortion and the reason for seeking the abortion falls under the grounds that are set out in the 1967 Abortion Act, and anybody who accesses an abortion outside of those provisions can be criminally charged. And you are correct that we have seen an incredible increase in the past 2 years of women in the UK and in England and Wales being prosecuted for abortions.
So Mara, what exactly is driving this sharp rise in prosecutions?
I think it ties into the rise of the right across the UK and Europe and the US. And I also think that the victory to the anti-abortion movement in America of overturning Roe v. Wade has emboldened anti-abortion activists. And we know for a fact that a lot of anti-abortion money is coming into England and Scotland and Wales. It was just reported the other day that an anti-abortion group here with ties to a group in the US has spent over £1 million lobbying Westminster.
And this, of course, as England and Wales have incredibly harsh penalties for women who find themselves in these circumstances.
Yes, in fact, you can face up to life imprisonment. I mean, that's more than you would get for raping somebody or potentially murdering somebody, that you could actually go to jail for life for choosing what to do with your own body as a woman.
And it's also happening as UK MPs are due to have a free vote on a proposal by the Labour MP Diana Johnson to abolish the criminal offence associated with a woman ending her own pregnancy. So is this vote going to pass?
All we can do is cross our fingers and hope. Unfortunately, the rhetoric from the anti-abortion movement is very much misplaced. There's a lot of focus from them about the fact that this passage of this legislation would allow abortion up to birth, which is not what the legislation is about at all. What it's about is the fact that any woman who does her own abortion outside of the NHS at the minute, using pills which are safer than Viagra and safer than paracetamol and on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines, whether she be at 8 weeks pregnant or 15 weeks pregnant or 20 weeks pregnant, could go to jail. And that's just not okay. That abortion is the only medical procedure that has criminal sanctions against it. Not only criminal sanctions, but that 2 doctors need to give you permission to have an abortion, which is an incredibly safe medical procedure, but you don't need 2 doctors to give you permission to, for instance, have brain surgery. So I'm really, really hopeful that the vote will pass. The bill in front of Parliament, there's actually 2 bills in front of Parliament, one from Diana Johnson and one from Stella Creasy. Neither of them is a perfect legislation, but both of them would be an improvement on what we have now.
So, in your opinion, what needs to be done to ensure safe abortion access across the UK?
We need to have no criminal prosecution for people who have abortions. And also, at the same time, it would be good to ensure that there is provision of abortion across all of England and Wales, not to mention Scotland and Northern Ireland, where the abortion law is slightly different due to devolution. But the fact of the matter is your access to abortion is very much dependent upon where you live in terms of whether or not there's a provider, in terms of what kind of abortion your local provider does. And so what we would really like is for abortion to just be a regular part of healthcare that all obstetricians and gynecologists know how to do, and also that GPs and midwives would be allowed to do abortion with pills, which, abortion with pills is such a simple procedure that doctors don't need to be involved. And again, this is backed up by the World Health Organization and the International Federation of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So it would just be nice if abortion were as easy to get as any other medical procedure without long waits, and providers who conscientiously object to providing abortions.
Mara Clarke, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Now, here in France, self-defense courses for women are becoming extremely popular. Official figures revealing that in 2022, the majority of martial arts licences were owned by women, accounting for 62% compared to just 38% for men. This report from our colleagues at France 2 Television also shows how for many it's a way of confronting past traumas while also learning to avoid legal ramifications.
It was 6 years ago when Joelle Garcia noticed a car following her as she walked home.
I knew that if I got into the car, it was over.
Paralysed by fear, she struggled to get home.
The driver got out of the car. He grabbed my arm. He tried dragging me into the car. Even talking about it makes me anxious. I managed to struggle free, but I don't know how.
Joelle had narrowly escaped being raped. She spent months coming to terms with what happened.
Just being outside made me really anxious. I couldn't understand why I had to go through that. So eventually I said that I had to take matters into my own hands and learn how to defend myself.
Like Joelle, more and more victims of sexual assault are turning to self-defense classes. These women have all endured some form of physical assault or verbal abuse. Their instructor, Laurent Incan, is a serving French police officer. He says the difficulty for students is making sure they don't overstep the limits of self-defense.
You need to be able to justify what you've done and why, because people defend themselves, but sometimes they do it in a disproportionate manner, and they end up having to explain themselves in front of a judge.
Others have chosen to arm themselves.
I already own pepper spray, but I'm looking for something a little more intimidating.
This pistol has 4 tear gas cartridges and is one of the latest self-defense accessories. It's illegal to take it outside the home, but it could be used to fend off a burglar.
It's very impressive. If something happened to me, I wouldn't hesitate to use it. It doesn't scare me. It makes me feel more secure.
Tear gas remains the go-to accessory for most clients, with sales up by 30% in recent months, but its use is strictly defined by the law.
There needs to be a motive of legitimate defense and a threat. You have to respond straight away. You can't come back 10 minutes later and fire tear gas. And it needs to be proportionate. So if someone asks you for the time and you feel threatened, obviously you can't use tear gas.
Carrying these arms without a proper motive can carry big consequences, with fines of up to €15,000 and a year in prison.
And finally, a story about a group of female athletes who won't be heading to Paris for the Olympics. Late last year, the Ivory Coast Football Federation announced the withdrawal of the women's team, citing financial constraints as the main reason. But a growing number of its players have come out publicly blaming outright gender discrimination as the cause.
It's training day for the women's team of the Abidjan Football Club. Anne-Marie Mayaki is proud to coach this team, twice crowned national champions. This field is just a stone throws away from the gleaming new Ebimpe Stadium built for the Men's African Cup of Nations, and yet the women play on this dusty, rocky lot.
For professionals, these are not good conditions. When we train on these types of fields, lots of women get injured. Look, like her. Sometimes when we get to the games, we're missing players.
In Ivory Coast, the federation grants 15,000 CFA francs, equivalent to around €20 per year, to the women's clubs. That's 10 times less than they do for men's teams. For goalkeeper Cynthia Johore, speaking out against this blatant inequality could cost her place in the national team.
Today is the selection for nationals and I'm not there. When you openly criticize the system, they force you out.
In terms of salary, professional female players only get 5,000 CFA francs, equivalent to around €8 per training session.
I doubt the federation gives so little to the men who travel abroad to represent our country at the World Cup. We're just back from the World Cup and they only gave us 10,000 CFA francs.
The Ivorian Football Federation says the women's teams don't perform well enough to attract sponsors and notes that the new president quadrupled the grants to women's teams in 2022.
Today, our aim is to perform better, with better results. We expect clubs, through their skill and performance, to take us a step further.
The Confederation of African Football pledged to invest €30,000 into women's football in the country following the African Cup of Nations in Ivory Coast earlier this year.
And that's all for this edition, but in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you, so do reach out with your suggestions via Facebook, Instagram or X. So until the next show, bye for now.